Hey Brian, thank you very much for filling out the form, by the way. I really appreciate it and contacting me. I've just done this video real quick just to go over some of the things we found during the phase one audit, so during the free SEO audit that we conducted. So I'll be going over the recommendations and opportunities along with the issues that I found on the site, or things that I would adjust or change to improve the overall SEO. Now, one of the things that you did mention in your email was the page speed. So I did go through the page speed. I went through what we do is we usually go through all these different sections. They're usually they're foundational SEO issues that can occur on a website, and they're usually what they are is a lot of SEOs when they go in when you employ an SEO, what they usually do is they go straight into building content, building backlinks, building things that obviously do help SEO, and they require quite a bit of an investment. But what they do miss is kind of these foundational issues, these kind of basic foundational issues. So, for example, if they were to invest a lot of money into content, or they were investing the client's money into a lot of content, and their SSL certificate isn't installed, or their page speed is really slow, they're not going to, they're not going to experience the full force or the full value of that content. So that's why we kind of go through this foundational checklist, this SEO checklist. Now, I went through the checklist. I did look at the page speed. I didn't notice anything that you should be worried about in regard to page speed. Everything really checked out using the tools that I used, and you can do this yourself if you like. I can send you the tools, and you can just plug in your URL and see for yourself. But in my personal opinion, I wouldn't worry about the page speed for now, because it's really not an issue, and it won't be stopping you from ranking anytime soon. Now, one of the things I wanted to go over with you is just the main areas that I did pick up that I would take a look at that could be negatively impacting your SEO. And also, I'm going to give you some recommendations for moving forward. So let's just jump right into it. Now, one of the first things that I did look at was the conversion tracking online and offline. So I don't know if you've had an SEO or had someone do some marketing for you before. So wasn't sure if you had this set up, but it's always good to check because it's great practice. And as I say, if you are investing in SEO or paid advertising or any kind of social media advertising, and you're getting people to the site, having a good tracking system to track form fills, click to calls, all these different things like conversions on the site, it should be set up, and it should be set up correctly. So one of the first things that we would set up, what I'd recommend, and you can take this to your SEO if you have one, or you can, obviously we can offer this as a service for you, but what you can do, what we do is we'll just set up correct conversion tracking inside of Google Analytics, so you can see how many people are filling out forms, and then we'll also sometimes, as an optional extra, what we'll do is we'll add the the conversion value as well. So, for example, if someone fills out a form, we can put a value against that form or that free consult, or say for example on your site at the moment, I noticed that you had a service call cost. So it could be the form, every form that's filled out equates to $165, which is a service call cost. So that's what we can set up as well, and then you can see inside of your analytics, how much it's generating month over month. Obviously, it's not entirely accurate every time. Sometimes, the forms are different. Sometimes they're asking questions. Sometimes, it's not entirely accurate every time. That's why it's nice to every month just check over, which ones did become real leads and which ones didn't. So we'll set that up for you, and I'd highly recommend setting that up if you are outsourcing these services to an SEO or setting up properly. And I will cover that a bit more in depth a bit later on, but what we'd recommend is setting up thank you pages on the site. So what would happen, and I did explain this in one of my videos if you are interested in finding out what this is all about, if you head over to my YouTube channel and you go over to the video, set up Duda form tracking with Google Analytics, you'll be able to check that out and see. You might be able to do it yourself as well. So yeah, recommend that. Okay, resubmit site XML sitemap to Bing Search Console. So this is just standard practice. This is nothing for you to worry about, but this would be something that you know, if you sent this to your SEO, they would understand what we mean. Develop HTML sitemap and add to footer. So that's another thing that if you send it to the SEO, or you know, it's recommended to have something like that in place. Internally link pages to money pages. So obviously, looking at the site, I'm going to go over the recommendations and things for the overall site in a minute. But what you want to do is what we do with our client sites is we have specific pages. Say, for example, your home page that are ranking, that we want to rank for, you know, the main keywords, which we call the money keywords, which could be, you know, essential vacuum or essential vacuum services in Connecticut, right? So what you want to do is we will set up lots and lots of, well, what you want to do is you want to, with the current pages you have, and then within the, you know, further down the line, when you add more and more pages to the site, what you want to make sure is that you're linking back to this specific page, right? So say, for example, you have the repair page in here or the buying guide. What you'd want to do is you'd want to have a link, a relevant link, say, for example, you know, let's say central vacuum, right? And this link will basically just be a hyperlink that goes back to the home page, right? And what you want to do is you want to make sure all, you know, most pages that have a good amount of content on have some sort of link going back to your main pages, right? So this could be the home page, this could be the repair page, depending on what pages you believe are the most important. And then once you do this in Google's eyes, this powers up this page and shows to Google that this is the most important, these are the most important pages, so they're more likely to rank, okay? So that's something that I'd recommend, and I can't really find any internal linking or any kind of links in any of your pages. Obviously, this works better for sites with a lot more content, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute and what I'd recommend in building more content on your site. But, you know, for example, a site that I'm playing around with at the moment, building for a client, what we have set up is we've set up multiple pages, lots and lots of pages around their service, you know, informative learning pages. And then within each page, say, for example, TMS success rate, we will add internal links that look like, you know, this or this or this, and we have these consistently spread out through the article, and each link is obviously relevant to that page, right? So, you know, you wouldn't want to have something like, let's say, standard linking back to, you know, TMS versus medication, or how does TMS work, because that's not relevant, is it? You want to make sure the keyword is how does TMS work, and that links back to the page how does TMS work, because that would make sense in Google's eyes and in users' eyes, right? So to bring it back to your example, you wouldn't have the worst central vacuum and then that link back to your home page, right? So yeah. So yeah, I don't have to worry about that at Favicon. So the reason why I've just added that is just something, as you can see here, it's the little images up in the tab section up here. I don't know if you can see that, but up in the tab section up here, I would redo that little design up there because we can't really read it. Add terms of service page. So that's obviously you've got the privacy policy page, but it's good to have a terms of service or terms and conditions page as well. And you can set that up within Duda. If you'd like me to show you how, more than welcome to. I may do a video on it actually, but there is an app, or like an add-on or an application, which you can get, which is called Termageddon. And it's like I think it's like $90 or something. I'm not sure. It's like $90 a year, and basically it re-updates terms of service pages and privacy policy pages every time new laws and regulations come out automatically on Duda. So I'd recommend looking into that. So cover pricing information and variables. So this is kind of hinting into some of my recommendations, but one of the things that I'd recommend is having, obviously you've got a buying guide in here, which is great, and it basically goes over all the different things that you need to consider when purchasing a central vacuum. Although if I think about the actual pricing of your service specifically, the only pricing that I can see about your service is fairly hard to find, to be honest. I mean, there isn't, I would have a specific page on our pricing, but the only real pricing I can find is this $165 in here for a service call cost, right? Now, I do understand that there are variables and there's lots of different things, costs that come into play, especially with services like central vacuums, depending on how big the house is, things like that. Although, even if you could mention the variables that come into play, that's just as good, right? Having the variables on the site explaining, what occurs when pricing, for a client, or when, building a quote or whatever it is, or building an invoice, having them and explaining them on a separate page within your site would be massively beneficial. Another client that I was actually doing an SEO audit for, I found out their competitor was actually doing a cost calculator, like a budget calculator. So I'll just show you the example. So obviously this is another company that have a product that has multiple variables and things like that, and it really depends on the cost depending on the different variables. But what he's done is he's set up a calculator which covers the different variables, the length, the width, the load type, the postcode or the zip code, the height, things like that, and then it will give them a rough budget as to how much it will cost, which is really nice. I don't know if this would be possible, but what it does is it takes the variables, instead of explaining them on an article, it combines them into a budget calculator, giving people the option to find out a rough idea of how much it will cost, okay? And also, I was looking at the central vacuum competitors in your local area. And one of the things that may give you a slight edge compared to the competition, I think it was Nutmeg, this one here. If I click on this site, which may give you a slight edge to the competition, would be if I click onto their services, right? So they've got vacuum system central, system installations, things like that. Call us for competitive pricing, right? Now that's something that customers may not want to do, right? A lot of people want to try and avoid as much social contact as possible until they really have to, right, to book a service, right? If you can actually add your pricing on the site, or maybe with a calculator, things like that, you're already creating an edge against these local competitors, right? Because in my personal opinion, and I've seen this before and I do it myself, is people do compare with pricing, right? People do go through different pages in different services and compare the pricing. So, that would be a good idea to have it on there. It gives you a slight edge to the competition. Quick example of an internal link there, you see. So central vacuum repairs, what they've done is they linked that back to the central vacuum repairs page, and this could improve their SEO. That's what you'd want to set up. 2 seconds, let me just carry on here. So add NAP in footer. So one of the things that I'd recommend, and I noticed on your site, is adding the NAP, the name, address, and the phone number within the footer of your website, right? So one of the things I actually came across that I'd highly recommend you insert is an NAP, because it's massively beneficial for local SEO. So I can see you've got 2 locations here, but you haven't actually added the real, the address. Obviously the phone number, you've got the phone number there. You've added, parts of the address, but you haven't actually added the office address. So I don't know, for whatever reason this may be. Maybe you don't want to add the address on the page, but that would be something I'd recommend you set up. Also, when I click onto the Google My Business, 2 seconds, sorry here. When I click onto the Google My Business, I can see that there isn't an address on the Google My Business. There are service areas, but if there's a location, a specific address or location for this business, I'd highly recommend adding that as opposed to a service area, because this is just much more efficient for SEO purposes and things like that. A bit more trustworthy within Google's eyes. In my personal opinion, I'd recommend having an address as opposed to just a service area, and I'd have that on both GMBs or both locations. Okay, now 2 seconds. So having the NEP, and then once you've got that in place, what you can then start to do is build out citations or business directories. I know you've already done this. I can see there's already some on that have been built using the report that I've done. I can send you this, or you can obviously just copy the code and view it. But as you can see here within the PDF, you have got some citations built, but these are around your business name and phone number. Obviously, some aren't matching, and there are a lot more opportunities. There's only 28 of these. There's 233 possible citations we could build. But having that address and having those business hours and things like that in there as well could just increase that consistency, increase the trust and transparency with Google and users, right? So having that in place, I'm kind of jumping down to the last points down here in the Google My Business. But if we're continuing on with the Google My Business, obviously adding the physical location, then adding the address for the physical location, then adding inside business location photos and outside business location photos would also be beneficial. I did notice, you've got some great photos on there anyway. So you've got some, service photos and team photos and things like that on there, or photos of yourself. But having, photos of the actual business and outside of the business, and then what you would do is then when you upload them to the Google My Business in here, what you then do is just make sure the file names and they are so make sure the file names explain exactly what you do, and the different keywords and things like that. So it'll be like outside of business in Connecticut, or outside of central vacuum business Connecticut, something like that. And then you'd upload them to the site, upload them to Google My Business, and then also, if you want to take the extra mile, you'd also geotag them. So geotag photos, or geotag photos, GMB. So one of the things we do, there are tools to do it, but what you can do is you can geotag the photos to your specific address, which would then increase the likelihood or increase the relevance of your business to that location, right? I hope that makes sense, but that's just a technique that you can do when you start, adding addresses and you start adding real photos of your, office and things like that. Obviously, again, these are all recommendations. So again, with the Bing business as well, the same thing applies. Add a physical address to the Bing business, and also add the hours, because I know you've got the business hours on the Google My Business, but if I head over to Bing, and I go to Central Vacuum Service CT, I can't seem to find the hours, and obviously, just recommend adding the hours on there to keep it consistent and keep it, obviously Google is the huge player in the search engine industry, but a small percentage of that is still using Bing. So having that in play as well, and it will also benefit your overall SEO strategy, because this is another example of a business directory, just like TripAdvisor, just like, Yelp, things like that, just like the Better Business Bureau, having, the hours and having, all of these different profiles fully filled out, instead of just having the phone number and the name of the business, having them filled out with addresses, business hours, all these different things will benefit your local SEO. Okay, so to move on, One of the things that I would recommend as well, and I think I found a competitor. It was based in Los Angeles, so it's not really a competitor, but I found someone offering central vacuum services in central vacuum service Los Angeles, something like was it Los Angeles? Los Angeles. Now I'm gonna kind of jump into some of the recommendations I have as well now, but one of the things that this company has is a section on what is central vacuums, right? And this is something that I noticed was missing within your site. A real explanation as to what it is you exactly do. And this is something that I see, this is can be, I mean, it's an easy mistake, really. A lot of businesses, they're focused on talking about, why they should choose us and all the experience they have, but they don't actually explain what it is they do, the benefits of what they do, and then maybe some common questions and information that they usually receive around central vacuums themselves. Okay, and this can obviously this happens all the time. I mean, I used to have the issue with myself when building websites. I'd realize I haven't actually explained, when I first started out anyway, I haven't actually explained the basics of what they do. And this is something that needs to be answered literally as you land on the site, right? Usually, okay. When I scroll down, we've helped over 6,000 homeowners, 20 years, things like that, clog weak suctions. When I first landed on this site, I actually didn't know what a central vacuum was, okay. I had to go leave this site, type up on Google what is a central vacuum, come back to the site, and then, obviously carry on browsing through your website. But, having to do that is then making it harder for customers to find the information they're looking for. And that is solely one of the main issues. I mean, forget about SEO. If you can't, have some simple kind of explanation as to what it is you do, the features and benefits of what a central vacuum is, and maybe, this is communicated within text content, images, and videos. It's not going to be it's not really going to be it's not going to be a successful SEO campaign. It's not going to be a successful paid advertising campaign if you can't, structure the site in a way that really explains and educates users on your service. Okay, especially if it is not as well known as plumbing and dentistry and things like that. So, I mean, the example I was going to show you was this site on here. So, obviously not the best site in the world, don't get me wrong. But when I land on here and I go down, what is a central vacuum? They've explained one of the main buttons within the header. I don't know if they've got it on the homepage, but I would have it on the homepage as well. Is they've given a video explanation about central vacuums, everything about central vacuums. They've got, a very simple explanation as to what it does and the benefits of it and how it works. And then obviously it's got, what it cleans and things like that. So, I mean, this isn't massively detailed, but it's touching on, even the video is quite nice as well. I mean, it just talks about, how it works and what it is. And obviously, you're appealing to two different types of readers as well. People that read visually through images and video, like I do, and then people that read through text. I mean, even if it's not even complicated, long paragraphs of text, it's just quick, easy to read, sentences down here, which is, I mean, I personally would change the design a bit, but it gets, it touches on it, and it's, massively important. It's something that I noticed was one of the missing key components within your site. So, I mean, that is what, obviously there's some frequently asked questions down here, but again, it's how do appointments work, services, central vacuums, which is great, don't get me wrong, and these should be answered. But the real question remains is what exactly is it and how does it work? And then obviously we can go back to what we were talking about earlier and the actual pricing of your services as well. These are some of the main questions that need to be answered. So obviously you can do this in video format, and one of the things we like to call them is 80% videos. And what these are basically answering the 80% of questions that people usually ask on the phone or during free consultations or initial calls, right? So then you don't have to, you can refer them to the website, or people that land on the site already know all the information before they give you a call. So all you have to do is just sell them the vacuum, as opposed to answer, tens and thousands of questions. So yeah. Indexation. So I did do a quick little snippet video on this. If you are intrigued, and on your website, actually, I uploaded it to my YouTube channel. But pages that should be de-indexed from your Duda site, and I gave you an example of one of the pages that I would highly, gave you an example of how we actually conduct this process of going through and looking at irrelevant pages that could be negatively impacting your SEO strategy. The way we look at this is we go through and we look at kind of no value pages. So these could be pages with no text or hardly any text, or pages that are unaccessible through the site itself. So for example, I did find like a whole store on your site, like what we usually do. So for example, what I would do, and I would type this up, and then what this gives me is all the pages that have been shown up in Google, right? Now, these are all the pages being shown up on Google and picked up by Google. So this is really important from an SEO perspective. But what it will also show are pages that aren't accessible through your website through a navigation bar, right? So for example, this page, join us or sign in. Okay, where can I access this page? There's a product section in here, but these aren't really, it doesn't go to like an actual product. It just goes over, the different, obviously types of, vacuums and things like that. But what I found in my indexation, looking at what's being picked up by Google, is I found, a store with, products and things like that. I found, more store, a category page with different products in here, which we can't access these, so they should be de-indexed from Google, as they aren't really providing any real value. As far as I know, okay? And if they are providing value, what I would do is de-index them from Google, but just don't delete them. You can, if the intention of having them is just sending the URL to customers, you can still do that. But what we want to do is we want to make sure everything that's being picked up by Google is like completely relevant to your overall SEO strategy. So for example, puppy love, this one here. So this isn't relevant to central vacuums. Obviously, it's a nice post, I get it, but it's a couple of sentences about dogs, right? This isn't relevant at all to central vacuums in your overall, marketing strategy. So I would de-index this from Google. So we found a bunch of URLs, and I've just given like a note in here, all the URLs that I'd recommend de-indexing. Yeah, and another thing I did notice, a quick note, and I'll write this down, is the navigation bar is inaccessible on certain pages, like the blogs. I can't find the navigation bar within this page. So I'd recommend, checking that out, seeing if that's something that needs to be addressed. To move on, there is a 404 page. Obviously, if basic SEO kind of things, you need to address 404 pages and de-index them and remove them from Google, because they're a big issue in terms of your SEO strategy. Google Search Console, obviously I did look at the data and things like that, and it was unusually low. So I may have to check the embed code just to make sure that's working properly. Obviously, there is a section within this audit called the Phase 2 section, which I'm not going to get too much into right now. I'll do a video on that. Bing Search Console, obviously the same goes with Google Search Console. Resubmitting your pages to Bing Search Console, making sure they're indexing on Bing. Google Analytics, there is the incorrect URL, and I just think it's good practice. At the moment it's HTTP, and it should be HTTPS. So I think just good practice to change that. In my opinion, just change that. Link Google Search Console, don't have to worry about that right now. Redirect to users to thank you pages after form fills. So I did test out the form fills, and you want to make sure after they're filling a form, they redirect to a thank you page, and then what that does in turn is fires and notifications Google Analytics to show you someone's filled out a form. Okay. Schema markup. You've got. I mean, obviously there's already schema markup on the page, but these are some recommended schema markup that I would recommend adding. But you've got local business markup. You've got some of the schema markup that not a lot of websites have, which is great, to be honest. It's the first time I've come across it for a while, so that's wonderful. But these are, if you really wanted to take it to another level, well, if you wanted to expand on your schema markup, recommend adding some of these. Website design. Another thing, obviously, I'm going to go over the design actually. This is my last point, and then we'll end the video. But what I'm going to say is, if it was me, and I would be, providing services for you, one of the recommendations that I would have was to be, to develop local pages, right? So location pages. So I can see that you've got multiple locations and services or places that you service on here that you listed out. One of the things that I would recommend is some of the ones that are more kind of profitable or bigger areas. I would actually create a specific location page for them, right? And I'll show you an example of one of your competitors that have done this, okay? I believe they did this. It was this company who did this. But what they did is they've set up, as you can see, all the cities they serve, and they've set up specific location pages to rank for these specific locations, right? And they've obviously analyzed which ones are the more profitable ones as opposed to the others. So we'll just show you an example here, Brentwood. Okay, Brentwood Central Vacuums, and then what will happen is we'll plug this into Google. I don't know what their rankings are like. It's just off the top of my head. We'll say we're in Los Angeles, and then we'll put the keyword Brentwood Central Vacuums, and as you can see, they're ranking #1. So this is what I'd recommend for some of the areas that are more profitable. Create some specific location pages for them, just to get some more rankings, and then also develop informative content, video, text, and images on the central vacuums. Explain what it is, the benefits, and how it works. This is another thing. I know I touched on this a bit earlier, but you could take it, you could take it further. By the looks of it, central vacuums, I've only briefly looked at it online, but it hasn't got a huge knowledge base. I mean, it's not massively competitive online, right? So what I would recommend, vacuum. Oh, sorry. Okay, central vacuum service or central vacuums. Right, let's just put central vacuums. What are central vacuums? Right. So as you can see here, there's how does central vacuuming work? What does central vacuum use for? Does it increase the home value? All these different things. You can use Google, which is what I do sometimes. I mean, I could just use Google and look at what people are asking. You can use Answer the Public, which is another tool. I'll leave a link. Well, if you want the link, just type up Answer the Public, and it gives you all the different questions people are asking about your product or service, right? So what I then do, by the looks of it, this is a bit of a niche that doesn't seem massively popular as compared to like another local business service, say dentistry or plumbing, right? So what I would then do is create content around all of these different questions, create high quality content around all of these different questions, publish it on the site, right? And what you want to aim to be, obviously this is the top goal, but be the education head of your industry, right? So you want to be the education symbol. So anyone asking questions around central vacuum services, anyone asking about anything about central vacuums, they go to you, okay? And that's the kind of the end goal when thinking about building content for a niche, right? You want to be the kind of health line of the industry, right? So Healthline are kind of the education head of health, or WebMD are the education head of the health industry, right, online. And then you go into all these different niches. So you've got like brain surgery. Maybe there's like a education head for brain surgery, or gardening, or tree surgeons, things like that. You want to be the information head. And I think, in my opinion, it's definitely possible, especially within the niche they're in. Now, what is the benefit of this? Okay, there's a couple of benefits, right? The more content you build, obviously, the more content you build and the higher quality of this content, the more rankings you'll receive and the more traffic you'll get to your site, which in turn, the more traffic and the more national traffic you get. So someone in, let's say for example, Brentwood, Los Angeles is looking up how does a central vacuum cleaner work. They come across your site. Maybe they're not going to become a client with you because you're in Connecticut, but what's happening is they're bringing traffic to your site from all around America, which will in turn boost your local rankings, right? So the more national traffic you get, you boost your local rankings, right? So that's massively beneficial. The next part is education. When clients land on your site, they can see that you're caring about them and you're caring about their knowledge and education, and you're completely transparent with all the different questions, the pros and cons around central vacuums, right? And this also, increases the likelihood of that sell, or increases the likelihood of that browser to become a real lead, okay? In addition, now, there's another thing. I would apply this terminology to something like having lots of content on your site and having lots of educational content that's ranking. I would call this multi-touch marketing, right? And I may be wrong about this, but multi-touch marketing, the whole idea of it is multi-touch campaigns reach your target audience with a consistent message in a variety of formats to reinforce your brand and image, okay? So you've got a customer, they come on your site, right? Or let's say you've got a customer and they're they're typing up different questions about central vacuums. Your website keeps on popping up for these different questions, right? Now, do you see what I'm saying here? That would be, in my opinion, an example of multi-touch marketing, really. You're coming up in a variety of different keywords and you're coming up second, first, third, multiple times consistently. And what does that speak in, what does that speak in their mind? What does that say in their mind, right? That means that you're an authority and you're an authority within this industry, and that's why you should trust us, okay? That's why you should become a client with us, because we care about central vacuums, we care about the education, everything like that. So yeah, having lots of content on the site around central vacuums would be one of the main things I would recommend, having that in place. Yeah, massively beneficial. And there's a lot of opportunity there, especially within the niche that you're in. Not massively competitive from my understanding. Also, the images as well. If I was to, let's say we were going to come onto the service, I would look at readjusting these images, because when I land on here and I don't know what a central vacuum is, again, the images don't really communicate exactly. I would think a central vacuum is, something that like a portable one that you bring around the house, okay? And that's just based on your logo and the language that you're using, okay? The image doesn't explain much to me, things like that. I wouldn't know that it's not just a standard vacuum. I'd think, I would think it's the portable vacuum. So use images, use videos, things like that. Use better language and things to improve the communication of what you do and the education. Okay, so that's everything from me. Let me know if you have any questions. Cheers. I'll probably do the phase 2 audit as well if we have enough data from Google Search Console and Google Analytics. See you later. Thank you, Brian.